Hello and welcome to the 2024 California Center for Ethics and Policy Election Fair. I'm Alex Mabba, the director of CCP, and we're super pleased to be partnering for this event with a bunch of other people on campus. I'm not even going to remember all of our different partners, but we have Steve Lynn from the Mel Studies Initiative. We have my co-director for the Digital Humanities Consortium, Dr. Rachel Van. We've also got Philosophy Club people here, the Student Initiative for Justice, the Society for, is it Journalism Professionals or Professional Journalists? Society for Professional Journalists, a couple other honors student groups that are co-sponsoring, the History Club, so we are super grateful for all the partnerships. And we have a full day of events planned. So for the morning, our first speaker is going to be Dr. Lacey Davidson, who is the director for the Center for Ethics at University of Indianapolis and a really awesome organizer in Indiana. Then we're going to be hearing from Liz Munoz, who is a digital media producer at ABC News Los Angeles, and she's going to be interviewed by Christine Pasquale, who is a student journalist for the Poly Post. And then Steve is going to be talking to Jackie Wu, who just wrote a book on being an election official during the 2020 elections on the front lines of democracy. And then talking at the beginning of this, I spaced on literally the most important person, more important than even me for organizing everything today. She had to step out. That's Michelle Fiorato, who, as of today, is Director of Strategic Initiatives and Special Projects for University Advancement at Cal Poly Pomona. So she is really the one making this whole thing happen. The other thing I forgot to mention is that Cal Poly Pomona is participating in a ballot bowl where we're competing against other universities. It's a kind of friendly competition to see who can register the most people to vote. And I think I think Charlotte dropped some of this stuff in the chat. Yeah. These are so some of the media and stuff here. So if you do register to vote, or if you get anybody else to register to vote, if you could go to cpp.turbovote.org and registertovote.ca.gov and castudentvote.org, and then select California State Polytechnic University, Pomona. We can also send some of this stuff out for everybody who registered. We can send some of this stuff out in a post-event email. And then from 12 to 2, we have lunches for everybody. And we're going to just walk down the hall to Ursa Minor, and we're going to have a table fair where a number of folks who are running for local elected office are going to be here. So folks running for Pomona City Council, some folks running for Congress, some folks running for State Assembly, and different political representatives of different political parties and interest groups. We're going to be there to let you know about the different ballot initiatives. I literally don't know. I'm seeing all these ads for Prop 35, yes and no. I literally don't know what they are. So this election fair is really as much for me as it is for anybody else. And then from 2 to 3, Lacey is going to come back and talk about how to actually put some of these activist principles into practice. We're going to do some phone banking and text banking. And we're also going to have a session from 2 to 3 where the Young Invincibles are going to talk about the importance of voting. So we hope you stick around all day. And for all the students getting extra credit, just the longer you're here, the more extra credit you get. So rock on. Okay. Without further ado, I'm going to invite, well, I guess the other thing, we're a little bit late getting started, so we're going to, each of the sessions is going to run a little bit long this morning, but I hope that's okay. All right, so without further ado, I'm handing it over to Dr. Davidson. Thank you.
Thanks everybody for being here. I came in from Indiana, so this actually wasn't as early of a morning for me because it's already noon, 12:22. So we're doing pretty good. I'm ahead of schedule. So my main aim for this talk is to do a little, demystification around political organizing. And also help folks identify the ways in which they already have skill sets and ways of doing things that count as organizing, and we just need to take those same skill sets and apply them to politics. So that's my plan, and I'm hopeful that I'll get to all those pieces, but we might have to do some of it in the afternoon, which would be fine. First, I just want to say a little bit about some of the ideas, frameworks, and and strategies that come out in this talk. These are photos from a group called Indiana Task Force that I've been organizing with for about 9 years in Indiana. We are a statewide organizing group that centers the people who are most impacted by issues to take action in ways that are focused on their own lives. So sometimes when we think about advocacy or taking action, we're thinking about advocating on behalf of someone else. And our organizing strategy and our theory of change requires that we focus on people who are taking action to improve their own lives, including my own life. So these are just some different folks who I've been working with over the last 10 years or so. And I just want to emphasize that some of the stuff that I'll be talking about today really comes out of this work. So it's not something that I developed by sitting in my office all by myself. It really comes out of this larger work. I used the slides that my university has recently come up with, which requires putting your own face on the slide, which I don't really understand. So I decided to also include my cat Bruno and my dog Tuna. And I thought I would also tell you about some of their political virtues or their strengths. So Bruno has a lot of tenacity and commitment to his aims, particularly getting food. And he has a critical hope because it seems like he thinks he's going to continue to get fed, even though he has been fed. But I think he's eternally hopeful, but also critical because you can see it in his face that he's not sure whether it's going to come about. So, and then we have Tuna. He's very joyful, but also very persistent, diligent, and on the way here, I was also thinking very creative. He can really get what he wants. So these are some of the political virtues that I also look for in people. As I'm thinking about who do I want to work with, I want people who have an ability to see that we can build a different future, one that serves everyone with no exceptions, and that we can have a little bit of joy and happiness and playfulness while we're on the way there. And then that's me, but you know that because I'm right here. So I have I have a plan, 6 steps. I'm not sure we'll get to every single step given some of the time, but I'm just going to party on so that we can get there. So I want to tell you just a little bit about some of the philosophical foundations of civic engagement from my perspective. So for me, one of the main things that I'm thinking about is this idea of a freedom or a liberation or a life that is worth wanting. And part of that is if that freedom or liberation or whatever it is you have comes at the expense of someone else's experience, that it is not the kind of freedom that is worth wanting. So I have a quotation up here from Berlin, just saying, I rejected freedom with both hands and infinitely prefer to share their fate if the liberty of myself or my class or nation depends on the misery of a number of other human beings. The system which promotes this is unjust and immoral. So from my perspective, I think philosophy and thinking critically about the nature of freedom, the pursuit of what we're up to as human beings, requires us to also think about this, that we don't want it to be at the expense of someone else. So that's one thing. And then we have lots of frameworks. I heard some of y'all were just reading the letter from Birmingham Jail, which this comes from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and having this view of being able to resist unjust laws, engaging in civil disobedience. And I love this quotation, so I have not said to my people, get rid of your discontent. Rather, I've tried to say that this is a normal and healthy discontent that can be channeled into the creative outlet of nonviolent direct action. So this is one of the things I think are really important, and you can fill, if you're a philosopher, maybe you're thinking about this. So I put reasons, you can fill this in with whatever a duty to resist, an obligation to exist. So we have some kind of reason that's going to get us off the ground for needing to take action, not just in the interest of ourselves, but in others. And then there's two other ideas that are super important for me in my organizing. One is a view, that's a metaphysical view about human beings and the nature of being human as primarily relational and interconnected, that what we are is constituted, who we are and what we are is constituted by our relations with other people. And so I really like this quote from Fannie Lou Hamer, which sometimes we just see as like nobody's free until everyone's free, but it comes from this speech that she's giving at a university. She came from a family of sharecroppers, and she says, "Your freedom is shackled in chains to mine, and until I am free, you are not free either." So she's trying to motivate people who may be a little complacent in their lives, and how their lives are going, to say, look, this is a similar point, or this is not the kind of freedom to be wanting. And at the end of the speech, she references this hymn that's about being comfortable on the way to wherever you're going. And she's really saying, like, I don't think that we should just sit back in our comfort while other people are suffering. And that's because it impacts who you are, even if there's like an ignorance around that. Like you're not aware that this suffering is going to impact other people. And then this is my favorite philosopher, Grace Lee Boggs, who really emphasizes that creativity, imagination, building something else, very similar to an abolitionist framework where we have a two-sided view where we say, like, look out into the world and say no to something. I don't want to do this, but we also have the other side, like, yes, this is what I want. This is what the future can look like. And this is a quote that the last piece comes from a documentary about her life, which is my favorite information movie, as my husband calls them. She says, "I don't know what the next American Revolution is going to look like, but we might be able to imagine it if your imagination were rich enough." And so this thought that we need to get in a practice of imagining something outside of what we already have. So as a philosopher, this is how I'm interested in civic engagement, and my interest kind of goes in both ways. I was studying philosophy as an undergraduate, and then I worked as a community organizer, and I was like, I really want some more resources for thinking about some of this stuff. So then I went back to grad school to get my PhD in philosophy. And while I was there, I was like, we really need to be doing more stuff. This is not going to work. We can't just like talk about this stuff in the classroom. So now I kind of do both at the same time. So I think it is both a foundation, but also being engaged in the world is what can allow us to have a philosophy or to engage in philosophy in a way that really makes sense and is not completely abstracted away from the lived experience of ourselves. Okay, so I want to just talk a little bit about our theory of change and organizing strategy. And I think, okay, this is audience participation moment. So I need somebody to say some things. But I want everyone to think about the question. So consider the opinions of maybe your primary caregivers as you were growing up. In your household, did they have any preferences about specific food items? So I have some examples here, but maybe there are other ones that come to mind. So I have, maybe they had a view about what kind of soy sauce was the best soy sauce. Maybe they had a view, this is the one I use in the Midwest usually, about mayo or Miracle Whip here. And then maybe they have a view about hot sauce. So let's just first get a show of hands. Can anyone think of something like this from their household? So raise your hand if you have something in mind. Okay, now keep your hand up if you're willing to tell the group about it. So then just pick anyone. Maybe there's some people here in the front.
We always had the the lazy Susan in the middle of the table growing up, and we always had sriracha sauce there, and like the peppers and all the good stuff.
And did they have a specific view about, so sriracha is like both a product and usually a brand, and would you have other hot sauces, or was there a clear view that that was the superior hot sauce?
There was kind of an evolution over the course of my childhood in which there was an expansion of options.
Okay, so we might just add some more, especially in cases where there's some meaningful differences. Okay, anybody else? Anyone have one where it's like this way or no way else? Okay, we got one up here.
My family never wanted, my family, no one really liked ketchup except for one person. And she always would buy Heinz ketchup, and that was the only ketchup we've ever had, and it's always in the fridge, and she's the only one who eats it.
Okay, but a very specific brand. You wouldn't buy another one, that wouldn't make sense. Yeah, good. Okay, so I just want you to have this in your minds, and maybe someone on here also has one. If you put one in the chat, I'm seeing some things in the chat, but I can't see them. So
We got the chat taken care
oh, is it good stuff in there? We got some.
You're having the same issues about the Heinz ketchup.
Ah, okay, perfect. We got some. I also see maybe somebody's in the wake. Okay, so now I want you to think about this person that had a strong preference in your household regarding which product, and ask yourself whether you think it makes sense to try to convince them to buy the other brand. Okay, so if your person, like my mother, was a mayo person, it does not make sense to try to get her, in my mind, to use Miracle Whip. She would rather have nothing on the sandwich than to have Miracle Whip on the sandwich. I'm seeing some nods. So I feel like this is true maybe for some other things as well. Katie and I were talking about enchilada sauce earlier. Maybe there's just one kind of enchilada sauce and you won't even use the other one. Okay, so I want you to keep this in mind for the next little bit. This question of people having picked a brand and having some strong opinions about this brand and whether it makes sense to try to convince them otherwise. Then there's this other group of people who the strongly committed people think they're not tracking reality, right? There's a bunch of people in the middle that don't have preferences one way or the other. So if you tell a committed Miracle Whip person that you don't care whether it's mayo or Miracle Whip, they're going to be like, that's wild. And then the other way around, right? If they like mayo, you don't care. But it's true. There's a bunch of people in the middle who are like, okay, I could go either way. There's infographics. What's the difference between Miracle Whip and mayo, right? Okay, so there's some people who really don't care that much, right? But they can be influenced by a good message from people who use the product, right? So this is a real example of Miracle Whip and advertising strategy. So Miracle Whip was trying to kind of decide whether they should convert mayo users into Miracle Whip users or whether they should try another strategy. And they decided instead to focus on people who already liked and used Miracle Whip and give them a way to spread their love of Miracle Whip to other people. So they started sending out recipe cards to users of Miracle Whip. And the thought is you're gonna, especially the Miracle Whip cake, you're gonna bring it to a party or something, a pitch-in, a potluck, whatever you call it, where you are. And then people are going to say, wow, this cake is so good. And you're going to say, yeah, it has Miracle Whip in it. Okay? And if they're male people, they're going to be like, ugh, gross. Like maybe they don't even like the cake anymore. But a bunch of people in the middle are going to be like, wow, Miracle Whip tastes great. Okay? And maybe now they're going to buy some Miracle Whip. Okay, so I want you to keep this in mind as we're thinking about this next little piece. So one of the things I hear maybe the most often in political education, organizing, conversations, is like something like, it just seems like everybody that I know already agrees. We're all on the same page, and when we have an event, even like this, we're just bringing a bunch of people together who already know, who's already doing it, and we're preaching to the choir, saying the same stuff to the same people. And as an organizer, I want us to think about Miracle Whip and mayonnaise, and thinking about this, a few ideas. So one is we're really often tempted to focus on people who disagree with us actively to try to convert them into believing what we believe. So this is the strategy of trying to convert the Mayo person to being a Miracle Whip person. Okay? And if, as we thought about with our own family members, we don't think that's going to work probably, right? They already have a view. So one of the things that happened in organizing is a shift away from what sometimes is called the opposition, but if you don't have to use that strong of language, you just say people who already have a view that's different than your view. One exception I will say is sometimes we really are invested in a particular person, like maybe it's like our dad or something. And that we, like, go ahead, keep talking to your dad, that's fine. But as a general strategy, focusing on the opposition or converting a bunch of people, that's not going to be it. So we can see already that that's an answer to the question of preaching to the choir, right? Because we don't necessarily want a bunch of people who definitely disagree, because preaching to them, so to speak, is not going to do much. Okay? And then we have this other view or other point about narratives. We can get it into our head that we don't know enough about politics to talk to someone about politics. And I think a really good thing to remember is that our stories are what people remember. They're what often move people to act. They're what are connected to emotions that can motivate action. And one of the examples of this I really like, there's these narrative video games that seek to combat misinformation. If you haven't played one, I really recommend it. But they're trying to, they call it pre-bunk, and in organizing we would call it inoculation. We're trying to get someone to think about it in advance. What is it going to be like to have to stand in opposition to misinformation, or in opposition to really anything, but in these cases, misinformation. And in organizing, it will be against the people who are going to try to convince them otherwise, right? You're trying to say, and especially in like union organizing, you'll be like, what will it be like when your manager says unions are bad for you? So you're having people think through, what are those emotions going to be like? How are you going to, how are you going to deal with that? Okay, and then, so that's like, these narratives are like the Miracle Whip recipe cards. Okay? Now you have something to say that is narrative in nature. So just like when you go to the potluck and they eat cake, and you say, oh, it's Miracle Whip. So they're going to remember that. And then this last part is sometimes people talk about this as like organizing is about giving the choir a song to sing. So rather than thinking about, okay, organizing is just preaching to the same people over and over, that often people are kind of at a loss for how to talk to people in their lives about politics. So even if they're like on the same page, roughly, having something specific to talk about, like the recipe card, right? You're not just gonna go to the potluck and be like, hey, do y'all like Miracle Whip? Right? You're gonna have something, some kind of path forward to talk about the Miracle Whip. And so that's the same thing for political organizing. You have to have some kind of method that makes it more natural for people to engage, and that is what we can get through preaching to the choir, through getting together, having the same people. We can solidify a message that makes sense, and then we can practice it and get like the vehicle of the Miracle Whip cards, but for organizing. And so for a lot of our work, the vehicle is voting. So I hope my next slide says why voting. It does, great. Okay, so for our organization and the work that I do, voting is like the Miracle Whip recipe card. So it is a way, a path forward to talk about other things. It gets the conversation going. It's sort of uncontroversial, right? Of course, there are some folks who have arguments against voting and wanting to withhold their vote and all that. So that's a conversation that you can have. But for the most part, it's something that you can kind of activate people with that can be a vehicle for further action. So we, of course, think that voting, or I think that voting is really important for lots of reasons. But I also think it is the beginning and not the end. So it's the beginning of a sustained ability to be connected in your community and to take action on other pieces. So part of the reason why I just want to make the connection, like how do we get from civil disobedience to go vote, right? Because most of the time in our contemporary context, voting is not civil disobedience, but of course that's not always the case in our history. But I want to just kind of flesh that out a little bit of like how do we get from we're going to do a nonviolent direct action where we close down the street, which you can also do, to okay, just go to the polls and vote. And that's because this can be a way to move people forward and to start some conversations. So I want to talk a little bit about relational organizing. So relational organizing is something that everyone can do. It's a low barrier to entry. So this is the one I want to think about today. So how many of y'all been getting text messages about the election? Okay. Can someone tell me quickly, what do you feel like when you get that message? What's the experience when you get that message?
Bothered.
Okay, we have one, bothered. Exhausted.
I'm deleting this later.
Deleting it later. Yeah, you're like, ugh, I don't have to do that. It's just random robot noise, right? Yeah.
For me, it makes me feel like I have to do something. It agitates me.
Okay.
I gotta click the link and do it now or I'll forget.
Okay, good. So there is some urgency, especially if it's something that you're like kind of into. You're like, okay, I agree with this. Ready to go. I really feel like I saw a shift in the messaging early in like, and I'm in Indiana, so the messaging's probably different. But in like July and August, I was like, who is writing these text messages? They have not read the research. But now it's much better. They're doing a better job. Okay, but the point here is that mass text campaigns do work. They do move people, but just a little bit. And the reason why they work is because they can reach a ton of people, right? I do text banking in my organization as well, and you can send 10,000 texts a day from a single phone number. That's because of the law. You could send more physically, right? Because it's a computer program that's helping you do it. But there is someone on the other side, so that's what's funny is people like often think it is a robot, but at least in Indiana, you have to press send on every single text message that you send. So when I do text banking, you're using this computer program and you're going send. And so we always say that the people who play video games are the best text bankers because they have those fast fingers. Okay, so it does work. It might increase. These numbers are increase in likelihood to vote. Okay. So it works, and part of the reason why it works is because of the mass scale, how many text messages you can get out. Candidate canvassing is also effective. So this was not, the 6% is not voting for the candidate, but voting in general. So this is door knocking, going door to door, telling people information, making plans to vote. And then we have this 8.3% shift in increase in likelihood to vote. That's a text message from a friend. So that's that part of relational organizing that is so important. So we can see that it's much more effective on the one person level. It's actually going to move someone. And we can, again, think about this with the Mayo Miracle Whip example, where if the person you know is telling you this cake has Miracle Whip in it, you should try it, that's going to be much more likely to move you than an ad for Miracle Whip. So the same kind of thing. It's the same thing we get with influencers now to some degree, right? So it relies on a little bit of that like parasocial relation in order to influence people to buy things in this case. So we are really big fans of relational organizing. So we like it because it works on the one-to-one level, but also we like it because it builds people's capacity to have political conversations. What's the last event that you organized people or invited other people to go to? Yeah.
Korean barbecue.
Okay, Korean barbecue, like a night out at the restaurant. Okay, perfect. What else?
My kid's 5th birthday.
Okay, yes, a child's 5th birthday party. Excellent. What else? Let's get one more. No one's doing anything?
Ryan organized me to come to this talk.
Okay, good. So we have, yes, someone, Alex and others, organized people to be here today. Yeah, good. Do you care if I go with you with the Korean barbecue example? Okay. So you want to go to Korean barbecue. What do you do first? You're like sitting in class and you're like, you know what would be great? Korean barbecue. What do you do next in your mind?
I just text my friends.
Okay, before that even.
Decide which spot.
Yes, decide who you want to have come to your Korean barbecue. So you're thinking to yourself, who am I going to invite? And you're probably not, do you have 100 people on your list for Korean barbecue?
I got 3.
3, okay, so we got 3. And why are those 3 people on your list?
Because they're my best friends in high school.
Okay, they're the best friends, and are they going to go with you, do you think, to the Korean barbecue if you ask them?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so this is the process of organizing right here. So our very first step is to build a list. This is the list of the people that we might invite. Okay, so I feel like for really big events, this is relevant. So if you ever had like a graduation party or a wedding or a birthday party, maybe you've just like written down everybody that you know, like just a bunch of people. And you're not even sure yet whether they're gonna come or not. And then from there you might narrow it down and you're gonna decide who am I gonna actually invite. And then you're gonna invite them. So you're gonna work the list, and part of working the list is being like, yeah, we don't actually have room for you at this 12-person table or whatever. So you're kind of like assessing it, you're working it, and you're inviting them. So you send a text message. Did you send a group message or individual messages to the Korean barbecue?
Group.
Group message, okay. So you put them all, and this is a long-standing thread, I'm assuming, since you've been friends since high school.
Yes.
And so you're using the mode of communication that you normally use to connect with this person. And that's the way you're working the list. And then if the plan was in the future, let's say it was for 2 days from now, you would probably follow up with them beforehand. You would say, okay, are we on our way? Or we're meeting up here, or whatever the thing is. You're gonna follow up with those people because you don't want to be sitting at Korean barbecue by yourself. right? So you wanna follow up with them. So this is the same thing we do when we organize. And I'm gonna have you do a sped up version of this now because we're gonna take at least one action before we leave here today because we can't just talk. So I want you to pull out a piece of paper if you're writing notes on paper or your phone notes app, whatever it is. And I want you to start to build your list. And maybe for the sake of time, you're not gonna write down every human being you've ever met, but maybe there's a list that comes to the top. And I'm gonna challenge you to come up with 10 people. And we're not gonna do anything because we're with them yet, we're just making our list. So 10 people, this could be people in your family, could be your friends, people that you work with, and people you go to school with. Could be hobbies. And when we're doing the really big, long version, we're gonna really think about the past and the present. So for people who have lived longer, a lot of times it's helpful to think about different eras of your life, like maybe where you've lived at different points, and then different people are going to arise. All right, checking in with how you're doing. Does anyone have 10? Okay, we have some with 10. All right, 9. So, okay, 10, 8, 5 at least. Everybody's got 5? Okay. All right, we'll keep moving. So now I want you to look at your list, and I want you to identify, let's just do one, just to make sure we finish. I want you to pick one person from that list that you could talk to today about voting, like in the next 10 minutes. We're gonna take action before we leave. So I want you to look at the list, pick one person. Maybe this is like, I always start with like my best friends from high school, you know, the lowest hanging fruit, because they're gonna respond to you, you know, it's gonna make you feel good. So you're gonna pick one person. And so I'm just gonna talk through these 2 steps and then I'll give you some more concrete information. So when you're working your list, and we can think back to the event, right? We don't just say, I'm gonna go to Korean barbecue at 7 p.m. exclamation point. Why is that? Why don't we just say, I'm gonna go to this at this time?
That's not an ask.
Yeah, we're not asking them, right? They don't have to respond. It doesn't elicit necessarily action from them. They could be like, cool, glad you're getting Korean barbecue. And it depends, this is a little bit culturally contextual. In the Midwest, like sharing plans is kind of like an implied invitation. So this can get dicey. It depends on where you are. But as an organizing strategy, we want to be explicit with a direct ask, will you come to Korean barbecue with me? Question mark, right? So when we're doing the conversations about voting, we're going to do the same thing. So we can say early voting is happening now, right? And that's going to be, pause. This is transparent facilitation. Has early voting started in California?
Yes.
Great, perfect. Okay, it started in Indiana. I meant to look that up. Okay, so we're gonna ask something specific. Can I count on you to vote early? You know, but that's like, this is your friend you're gonna talk to, so you're probably not just gonna say that. You're gonna like do a little bit more. When and where do you plan to vote early? This is a really good strategy because it also gets our another piece on the table, which is that people who have a concrete plan to vote are much more likely to actually vote. So we can work that in. From an organizing perspective, this is the best one. Will you vote early with me at this place and this time? And that's because it's really hard to flake on that, right? Versus if they just like tell you, I'm going to Korean barbecue at the same time as you at a different location, right? That's not, it's not going to be motivating. Okay, and then we have an ability to follow up with people, especially if you weren't with them when they took the action. So sometimes people are out doing things and you want to still know how it went. So you can ask, how did early voting go? Did you get a chance to vote yet? And then you can also ask them to do things like, will you ask 3 friends to vote early too? Yeah. And I'll tell you, just this happens organically, even if you don't notice it. So I do a ton of organizing. I haven't decided when I'm going to vote early. I haven't made my plan yet. And a friend who I'm often organizing said, hey, I want to go vote with you. When are you going to go? I've left her on red because I still don't know. But I will have to respond to her eventually, right? With my plan. So now she's out here organizing me. And she's probably not even thinking about it. She's not saying like, I want to make sure that Lacey votes, so I'm going to send her a message. She's just asking me because she wants to go at the same time as me. So lest you think that it will be awkward, just know that we already do this. We already invite our friends to our kids' birthday parties, and to Korean barbecue, and to this event, right? Okay, so we're going to do it right now in our last little bit of time. I was told I could go to 10:05. So here's just an example of a longer thread. So we can say something like, hey, I'm at a voter fair today, and I thought of you because you did. You wrote their name down on the list. And you can ask, do you plan to vote early in the election? Okay. So we're actually going to do it right now. So the person that you put on your list, that you said, I'm willing to text them or contact them in the next 10 minutes or so, you're going to send them a message right now that it doesn't have to say exactly that, right? And just like we use the the way we normally contact the people for the Korean barbecue, we're also going to do that for this. So if you normally message with them on Signal, message them on Signal. If you normally message them on Snapchat, message them on Snapchat. If you normally send them an Instagram message, send them, whatever the thing is. So I'm going to give everybody a moment to send their one message. So I will, when I look out into the audience, I will see tippy tapping on the phones. Okay, awesome. Did somebody respond to you? Yes, okay, we already have one response. So I'm just, for the sake of our celebration, I need to just see a show of hands first, how many texts, and how many count. So raise your hand high, so I can count how many texts we sent. Okay, we have at least 22 messages that we sent about voting. This format doesn't like PowerPoint. Okay, and then did we get, I know we have one response. Anybody else have a response? Yes, okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 5, maybe 6. Okay, and then maybe some people in the chat. Okay, so we have already some responses back to us. So I just want to emphasize that it is quite accessible to organize other people to take action. We don't have to go much out of our everyday routine. We also know that this is one of the most effective ways that we know of to move people toward action. The main thing that I hear about people is worrying about bothering other people, or something like this. Like, I don't want to add on. But when you get a text message from your friend, even if it takes you a while to respond to them, it does not feel the same as when you receive a random message from a political campaign. So just know it's not the same feeling in the body. And if you want to do some more of this is called relational organizing. I will be doing some of it this afternoon. So that's great. So I would love for somebody to join me. So we're celebrating the action that we took. Thanks so much for having me. It was great to be with y'all.